I spent 180 hours writing 10,000 lines of code for this.
It all began with MouseKey. I had just come up with a master plan for building the most high-tech mechanical keyboard possible and was super excited to get started. But then I was swept up on a cruise trip. Being the workaholic I was, and still am, I could be seen circuit diagramming for hours while relaxing on a beach chair and snacking on soft serve or tortilla chips dipped in fresh guacamole by the top-level pool. But since I didn't want to pay for the expensive Wi-Fi, I used a preloaded tab of Tinkercad to arrange the many buttons, resistors, and wires into the layout I was certain would work. I took screenshots of the diagrams when I was done, but then I accidentally reloaded the page. Well, it's not like it mattered too much since I spent even more hours tinkering with elbow connectors on Google Slides in order to format the connections from an Arduino Uno to Micro. But at least Google can save the device offline. As you can see, there comes to be many issues and frustrating challenges with drawing a circuit diagram. Of course, there are many other professional circuit diagramming software options, such as KiCad or even Fritzing, but then it's either not beautiful for the eyes or costs money. As an engineer, if there's something I want that doesn't exist or costs money, I'll end up sacrificing even more hours to create it myself. Here is the design criteria for the circuit diagramming software I wanted to use. First, those cute graphics in Tinkercad and Fritzing that can visually tell the layout of an Arduino circuit to even a newborn who's just opened their eyes. I wanted to make it a web application so that it's super easy to access on any device without having to download any software. And also because maybe I don't know how to build a real application. Next, I definitely needed offline editing and saving abilities so that I wouldn't ever run into a lost work catastrophe again. This is a small thing, but dark mode. It's a must for any software for nerds who may often be hobbying late at night. Now for me, I make circuit diagrams simply for seeing how all the components are supposed to come together and be connected, so I don't need to be able to upload code and view a simulation. However, uploading a custom part to use is forbidden on Tinkercad and pretty complicated for Fritzing, or at least from what I remember trying to do back when Fritzing was still free and I had only just started learning Arduino. Since I often use parts that aren't on Tinkercad, it's really important for me to be able to upload whatever image of a custom component I want to use and quickly configure the points that are linkable. So I'm basically developing Photoshop for electrical engineers. I just want to be able to make circuit plans that don't take an engineer to read. And finally, to fulfill my love for colors, I wanted to make it easy to customize the colors of the wires and certain parts with any of the 16,777,216 possible hex codes. It's why I named my circuit diagramming app with the appropriate title, Circuitful, Colorful Circuit Diagramming. When I first set off to program Circuitful, I realized that the only languages I understood were Arduino, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and maybe a little bit of Python. Furthermore, I'm lazy to learn new methods and wanted to get straight to programming, yet I only had one option to choose from, which is using the Phaser.js game development library on an online IDE called RepoLIT. First step was developing the part editor, where a PNG is uploaded and a bunch of red circles are manipulated to sit in the areas that are meant to have wire connections. When saved, a file is downloaded, which includes the name of the part, proper scaling of the image, and two arrays of values which represent the proportion of a point to the center of the image in the X and Y axes. It's kind of funny because then the user has to manually copy and paste each of the arrays into the proper locations in the JavaScript file and run it in order to use the custom part. This is the main area called the workspace, where the user can drag and drop various components and link them together using wires. And of course, an absolute must is being able to create 90-degree angles in the differently colored wires so that they can swoop around each other to clearly distinguish their paths. I also added easy customization to some components, such as the color of the LED and the resistance of the resistor. The color was changed by setting the property hue to the desired hex value. Yeah, that was pretty easy, but then it took like 6 hours to figure out the code that automatically sets the colors for the two middle bars on a resistor after inputting the desired ohms. It's done by dividing the total resistance down to the first two significant figures, and then picking the appropriate hex codes for the colors using an index. When a resistor is added, it's actually an image of the resistor from Tinkercad with the middle bars transparent, so that the two generated bars can peek through. The two small bars are linked to the main resistor so that they can follow wherever it gets dragged. On Tinkercad, there aren't many keyboard shortcuts, so excessive clicking for hours would often result in my right arm becoming sore, whether I was using a mouse or trackpad. That's why I made sure to include many keyboard shortcut options on Circuitful, from general ones like undo, redo, and box select, to object transformation tools that would perform as long as the object's menu is open. However, my favorite is being able to rotate a part or change the color of a wire just by hovering over it and pressing a key. Having many keyboard shortcuts would increase the productivity speed, but maybe not as many to rival Blender to avoid accidental activation unknowingly. Another thing that annoys me about Tinkercad is how there is limited snapping, so lining up the parts to make the wires exactly horizontal and vertical at even intervals is impossible as a perfectionist. But even when I made all parts have the same wiring point spacing, some things just don't line up, so snapping can be turned off to fix those pesky diagonals. And the last important design criteria I wanted was labeling parts that normally look identical, like the capacitors, diodes, batteries, and my favorite, which is the IC chip. From this to this, you can set the number of legs and type in the component's name. This is done by creating sprite sheets of the variations and choosing the appropriate frame with an index. Never again will you encounter being unable to find the appropriate black rectangular centipede for your schematic. I use this labeling feature for clearly marking each key on the circuit diagram for my keyboard, mouse key. When I finished programming all the satisfactory features, I also added in some fun extra tools like pen mode and autocolor. Pen mode is a wire drawing tool that lets you easily map out the path of a wire, but the downsides are that it doesn't stay connected to components and comes off in pieces, so it's not really that great for editing. Unfortunately, this is just one of my many annoying programming bugs that I simply gave up on. Autocolor is a simple button that changes the colors of wires connected to power and ground to red and black respectively, and all other wires are set to a random color. I'm not sure how useful it would be, but it was a fast coding project. And maybe there should be an option to have other colors just constantly on, so it'd be like a party mode. Okay, I think that's enough advertising from me. If you want to try Circuitful, click on the link in the description. Wait, hold on. The truth is, I should probably talk about all the issues with Circuitful because there are a lot. Too many that sometimes I don't want to use what I literally created for myself. I'll just mention two of the most annoying ones. First, we have the lag that'll happen when there are too many parts and wires in the workspace. I think it's partially because of when wires or parts are deleted, the data doesn't actually get deleted, simply setting it to not visible. So there ends up being these really long arrays that the CPU has to deal with. I'm sorry, I spent hours trying to figure out the data system to connect wires to appropriate wiring points on the parts, but it was just so complicated. And then we have the corrupt saving and opening system. As I talked about earlier, I had a lot of trouble with the data system, so when the user downloads the arrays as text files by clicking on the Save button or S on the keyboard, copy and pastes the values into the top of the workspace.js file, and then runs the program, they might be presented with a circuit diagram that doesn't exactly look like the one from last night. Unfortunately, the offline editing and saving that I wanted ended up being impossible. Obviously, Circuitful has way too many bugs to make it efficient to use, but still, I'm proud of what I created. And I do still occasionally use it to create diagrams for small projects. I plan on keeping Circuitful open source so that maybe in the future, one of you can improve on what I've started in the hopes of developing the ideal circuit diagramming software. Thank you so much for watching!